welcome into episode 175 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm August Trometer.
Putting a shorter time frame on website certificates, Chrome fights dangerous downloads, and a bit of a data breach primer. Let us learn from this edition of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. Certified good for a limited time only. You know, August, I think people might think that I was being facetious when I said, let us learn. There is a lot in this episode that I don't know. I have posed a ton of questions to you. I have not read ahead because I like to be surprised like everybody else. So really, I'm looking forward to finding out a lot of stuff today.
See, I thought you were making a produce joke.
Oh, lettuce.
Certified good for a limited time only, and then you talk about lettuce.
Lettuce, yeah. No, I was not. I'm not not nearly as clever as you think. So the Register out of the UK says that Apple has dropped a bomb on long-life HTTPS certificates. Of course, you drop a bomb on something, it doesn't live that long, which I guess is the whole point. What is it that Apple is doing here, August?
Well, basically, Apple's making it so that later this year, Safari will stop accepting new HTTPS certificates that expire more than 13 months from their creation date.
Okay. I know that we've gone over this on this show before, but I think it was before you joined. It's certainly long enough ago that I have forgotten. What is a certificate and what does one do?
Okay. A certificate is used to encrypt traffic from your browser to the server. These generally have an expiration date, and to make things easy, you can buy a certificate that lasts several years. Apple is stomping on that and causing companies and sites to get new certificates every year. Okay.
When you say you can buy them, I mean, how are they issued and by whom?
Well, there's a lot of different companies that issue certificates, too many really to mention. One of the most trusted is VeriSign. You have to give them a lot of information up front, such as your name, email address, etc., before they'll issue the certification.
Okay, so then take apart the sentence that you said earlier. Safari will stop accepting new HTTPS certificates that expire more than 13 months from their creation date. Maybe this is just so simple that I'm missing it. What do you mean accepting?
Well, that means websites using long life SSL or TLS certificates issued after the cutoff point will throw up privacy errors in Apple's browser. And no one wants to see those, not the user and certainly not the company.
Okay, so, but when you say accepting, I mean, I can ignore that, right? I mean, if I go to one and it throws up a privacy error, obviously, if I'm smart, I'm going to go, well, hey, hold on then. I don't want any part of this. But, I mean, I would still be able to roll past that, wouldn't I?
Sure. But the warning will say something to the effect of this site is not secure.
Right. Okay.
Which is scary enough for even people who don't really get it.
Right. Yeah. So what is the point of making it a shorter time frame versus the longer one that was cool, or that will be cool up until the end of August?
The aim of the move is to improve website security by making sure devs use certificates with the latest cryptographic standards and to reduce the number of old, neglected certificates that could potentially be stolen and reused for phishing and drive-by malware attacks. If bad guys are able to break the cryptography in an SSL TLS standard, short-lived certificates will ensure people migrate to more secure certs within roughly a year. And in fairness to Apple, this idea has been floating around for a while. Apple just finally planted a flag in the ground. What's interesting to me is that Safari on the desktop has less than 10% share, yet they're still going to be able to force changes on the entire browser industry.
Well, I mean, and that does make sense. I mean, this is kind of a big deal because the Register points out that what affects, Safari for the Mac, it's bigger than just for the Mac. It affects the iPad, and bigger than both of those combined, it affects the iPhone as well. Sounds like a win for consumers, though the report from the Register indicates that there might be some blowback from the developer side.
Yeah, shortening the lifespan of certificates does come with drawbacks. By increasing the frequency of certificate replacements, Apple and others are also making life more complicated for site owners and businesses that have to manage all of that stuff. An expert that spoke to the Register said companies need to look to automation to assist with certificate deployment, renewal, and lifecycle management to reduce human overhead and the risk of error as the frequency of certificate replacement increases. The company Let's Encrypt issues free HTTPS certificates that expire after 90 days, and they provide tools to automate renewals, so those will be just fine, and they're used all over the web now. GitHub uses a 2-year certificate, which would fall afoul of Apple rules, though it was issued before the cutoff deadline. However, it is due to be renewed by June, so there's plenty of opportunity to get that all figured out. Apple's website has a year-long HTTPS certificate that needs renewing in October. Microsoft is an interesting one. Its .com certificate is a 2-year cert, which expires in October, and if Redmond renews it for another 2 years, it'll trip up over Safari's policy.
Could they actually do it now? I mean, here's what I don't understand, actually, because Microsoft is a multi-billion-dollar company. It's billions upon billions, right? What am I missing here? Because if this is part of the job, this is part of the job. And I know Microsoft has more than one site, but every site's going to have somebody working on it. I'm a bit confused by the hand-wringing from the developer side, because, I mean, it's like at Burger King, they make you check your times and throw away burgers that have been sitting there too long, right? I mean, you have to, at the lowliest job, there are things that are defined by time. And so for Apple to now say, okay, once a year, I need to make sure that this is safe. I mean, for people to go, I don't quite understand that, because it's once a year and we're talking about security.
Well, I believe a few years ago, Microsoft actually let their certificates lapse because, managing that stuff, you put it in a calendar, you get an email from your certificate provider, and you're like, okay, I'll take care of it tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and, something's on fire that you got to take care of. And then you're like, okay, I'll take care of it tomorrow. And then something else comes up, and sooner or later, you just let it lapse, which is why automation is so important, and that's for a big company. For small companies, the expense is part of the problem too, because all of these companies could go out and renew tomorrow and be just fine. But, if you can find one that's free, that's fine. But the higher end security certificates generally cost several $100s.
Which will put a crimp in Microsoft's bottom line.
Yeah.
Now, the piece from the Register says certificates issued prior to the 1st of September, as we discussed earlier, they will have the same acceptable duration as certificates due today, which is 825 days. No action is required for these certificates. You're a developer. You also take security seriously. I am curious where you land on this.
Well, I can see why they're doing this. It really does improve security for everyone. So honestly, I'm all for it. That said, and we've kind of already talked about it, it's a horrible pain in the keister to have to manage certificates. If you forget to renew, then you'll start sending users a not safe message, which makes you look pretty bad. So as we also mentioned, I think you'll see a lot more automation for these in the future.
Boy, it's a busy week for browsers on the checklist. While Apple's working to shorten the life of HTTPS certificates, Engadget says Google is looking to do away with non-HTTPS downloads in Chrome. I'm going to do it again. Can you tell me what's going on?
There's a version of Chrome coming out in April that will warn users when they try and download files from insecure sites. Eventually, Chrome is just going to block these files if they're not from an HTTPS site.
Now, not unlike the certificate talk from earlier, I know that we've covered HTTP versus HTTPS on the show before. Can you remind us, please, though, what the difference is between the two?
Sure. HTTP is just web traffic. With HTTPS, the S stands for secure, or to think of it in a better way, SSL. So HTTPS traffic is encrypted, and no one can see the data going back and forth between you and the server.
Okay. I think you may have just answered it, but maybe if you could break it down a little bit more. What is it that makes HTTPS safer?
Well, it's all about encryption, baby. And if all of your data is encrypted, you're a lot safer out there. No one can see what you're browsing, even if you're on public Wi-Fi.
Okay, so what kinds of files will Chrome be warning people about then?
Well, April's release will only warn users when they try and download insecure executables. The .exe files, since they pose the most risk of introducing malware into a system. Chrome will alert users to less dangerous types of insecure downloads on a rolling basis. Archives, text, and image files will trigger warnings in future releases. But by the end of the year, Chrome will do away with the warnings and just plain block insecure downloads from websites that are otherwise using HTTPS.
I would imagine you may not know the answer to this, and I apologize if I'm throwing something at you that you don't know. Is it going to give you an indication that, hey, this tried to do something, but we're not letting it? Or is it just not going to let it?
I'm really not sure.
Okay.
That's it. That's an implementation detail that I'm not aware of.
Hey, come January 1st, 2021, everybody be sure and go to an insecure site and see. What do you say? Doesn't that sound like a dumb thing to plan to do for the new year? Here's the thing. New
Year's resolution.
Yeah, right. New Year's resolution. Do something dumb with my computer. I'm not a bad guy. I guess what I'm wondering is, and when I say I'm not a bad guy, I mean I'm not a bad guy. Like I'm not a villain. Like I'm not out here. I'm not a miscreant. I'm not a ne'er-do-well. What I'm trying to figure out is there anything to stop me as a good guy or a bad guy from setting up a site as HTTPS versus HTTP? In other words,
Nope.
We're hanging a lot on that S. And I'm wondering if it's just a money thing, can't I just pay and look safe?
No. In fact, if you're building a website, I'd encourage you to make the whole site HTTPS.
Hang on. I apologize because I think I asked that in a weird way. You're saying that I, as a bad guy, could pay to do this? Or you're saying, no, there is something magical about the S?
There's nothing magical about the S.
Okay. So
it's just encryption.
Okay.
Okay.
So just going to an HTTPS site doesn't necessarily mean that I'm dealing with good guys. It just means nobody can see what's going on.
That's true, except when you get a certificate, you have to give away a lot of personal information which is verified. So email address, name, that kind of thing. And that's not something bad guys like to share.
Sure. Okay. So you were saying, forgive me, you were saying basically if you're a good guy, you're a good gal, you're a good person, you're out there, you're about to build a website, don't start simple with the HTTP. You're saying start as you intend to proceed.
Yeah, start with HTTPS. As a matter of fact, there's a big movement trying to push all websites to be HTTPS going forward. And as I've said before, start with security. Don't tack it on later.
Yeah, there was it wasn't Google deranking sites that weren't HTTPS, or
Yes.
aren't they? I guess not. Weren't they? Aren't they? I mean, that's just part of going forward. That's the cost of doing business at this point.
Right.
Speaking of the cost of doing business, is it more difficult to set up an HTTPS site than it is setting up an HTTP site?
A little. You have to have the certificate, which can cost a little bit of money. Some hosting sites will provide these for you for free, though. Beyond that, the development is exactly the same.
This is not an ad, obviously, but I know, and so I won't mention the name. I work with a Yeah, build your own website place, right? and it's part of their included cost. So I would guess with like a Wix, with a Squarespace, with a, places like that this is something that's going to be included because, of course, they're charging you for their services. And so unless you're dealing with a GoDaddy where you're sort of like picking and choosing all the different parts and putting them all together, GoDaddy, heck, they may even offer it. I don't know for certain. But, I mean, if you're using sort of a WYSIWYG or maybe even like a little bit above that, I know these are things that they offer there. So it's not much more confusing.
Yeah, a lot of those services, it's just sort of one click, or they just go ahead and add it automatically.
Now, we did say in the last segment, as Safari goes, so goes mobile Safari. Same can apparently be said for Chrome. Engadget says the mobile versions of Chrome will receive the same updates, but there'll be one version behind the desktop versions of the browser. According to a Chromium blog post, mobile apps have better protection against malicious downloads, and the delay will give developers more time to concentrate on helping desktop users avoid malware. We'll do a data breach primer in a moment, but first a word about MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. Look under your seat right now. You get a Mac, and you get a Mac. Okay, not really, but if you're listening to this, you probably got a Mac. They're seemingly everywhere. More people using Macs means more personal information, medical information, financial information, more of our lives flowing through the Mac. You know it, I know it, and bad guys know it too, making each Mac a tempting target. Protect yours with MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by Secure Mac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your machine. Surf more securely with MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. Sign up for your free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. MGM data breach exposed personal details of 10.6 million hotel guests, reads a headline from Engadget. U.S. Defense Agency says personal data compromised in 2019 data breach, reads one from TechCrunch. Final cover maker SlickWraps coughs up customer info in a data breach, says another headline from Engadget. And hey, here's a fun one. Rallyhood exposed a decade of users' private data, says another one from TechCrunch. Now, that is just 4 headlines for stories that I set aside in the past week. And I'm sure there are plenty more that I missed. This show is called The Checklist, August, and I thought it might be fun if we put together a checklist for mitigating damage from data breaches, because if you're on the planet and you're online, you're almost definitely going to end up being caught in the data breach to go along with the several in which you've probably already been caught up. What are some of the things that we can do to protect ourselves before a data breach hits?
Well, I don't think we've talked about it in a while. I really don't. Password safety comes to mind.
Password safety. Password safety. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 may not be enough anymore, August.
That means use strong, unique passwords that aren't reused elsewhere. Don't ever share those passwords. And really, just get a password manager already, will you? Next thing I would suggest is keep an eye out on your credit. Many credit cards now provide free monitoring, which is nice. And there are companies like Credit Karma that will do the same thing for you. If you see new accounts popping up that you didn't request, shut them down. I really don't like sign in with Facebook or sign in with Google. Handing your credentials to a third party that uses your data to market to you doesn't sit well with me. Sign in with Apple, I trust more, mostly because they're trying to protect you instead of market to you.
Have you actually seen Sign In with Apple turn up anywhere? I haven't yet.
I've seen it in a couple of places, and I can't remember where.
Okay.
But it was fairly convenient.
It is starting to roll, though.
Yeah.
Okay, good. The Yahoo data breach from a few years back was huge. I'm sure, not everybody heard about it, but I've got to imagine most people did because it was just so ridiculously big. Then again, I, deal in tech news, so maybe the average John and Jane didn't know. But let's assume that, it's a big data breach and I've heard about the data breach and I think I might be affected. What steps should I take? And not specifically about the Yahoo thing. I mean, you're watching the news one day, they say XYZ Corp has had a data breach, and you're thinking, oh, I'm an XYZ Data Corp user. What's the next thing I should do?
Well, if you belong to a site that's been breached, go there and change your password immediately. And stick to the rules. A strong, unique password that's not used for any other account.
And of course, if you have used that password for other accounts, you do need to go change those too, because then you end up with the blunt force attacks, right?
Exactly.
All right. Remind people what those are, because I used it like I know what I'm talking about. Can you really quickly, a blunt force attack? Not a blunt force attack. That's not what it is, actually. It's credit stuffing, not credential stuffing.
Credential stuffing, yeah.
Credential stuffing. So good at the holidays. But remind people, please, what is credential stuffing? And sorry, everybody, because I threw out 3 terms before I finally got to the right one. Credential stuffing is.
So let's say a hacker goes in, hacks an account, and is able to get, let's say for some stupid reason, the company that they hack into stores your password in plain text. It's not encrypted or hashed. So now they have your email address and they have your password. So they just add that to a database that just goes out there and surfs the net and tries to log in with your credentials at hundreds and hundreds of sites until they find one where you've reused that password.
Yeah, this is a thing that I have a hard time getting some people in my life to understand. Because they have said to me before, well, nobody cares about my stuff. And you know what? You're absolutely right. Nobody cares about your stuff. They don't care about you. It's your stuff. That's the thing. It's the information. They don't care. They're not targeting you individually. They've just got bullet after bullet after bullet, and they're firing and seeing what they can hit. And so,
yeah, I mean, imagine if that email password combination was used at your bank.
Right.
Well, now they do care about your stuff.
Well, no, they still don't care that it's you. That's my point, because that's the one thing I think where people get sort of tripped up. It's like, well, it's okay if I reuse passwords everywhere because nobody cares about me. And you're right. Bad guys do not care about you at all. But $5 here, $10 there, $20 someplace else. Eventually, you're talking about real money. And if that 5, 10, or 25 is yours, they don't care whether it was your last 5, 10, or 25. It's not about you. It's about your data. It's about your information.
Exactly.
All right. I sound like a zealot, and I still don't know what I'm talking about. So we've taken preventative action. We've reacted to breaches that we've heard about. I'm wondering if there is a way for us to, sort of thread that needle. I've heard no news, but I am worried because, I don't know, I just am. How might I find out whether I've been caught up in a data breach about which I haven't heard?
Whether there was a breach or not, I regularly check the site haveibeenpwned.com to see if any of my email addresses have been compromised.
Now, hold on. Before you go anywhere, there's no O in Have I Been Pwned.
Correct.
Right. It's Have I Been PWNED, haveibeenpwned.com for people, listening and not reading, since we're talking.
When you do that, you'll get a list of what sites have been breached using that email. And you should go change all of those passwords ASAP.
All right. So you go to haveibeenpwned.com. you type in the email address that you most commonly use, or would you just say any email address that you use to log into anything?
Yes.
Okay.
Any email address.
And what they keep is a list of sites that have been compromised.
Correct.
Okay. And so then if your email address, it comes back and says, yes, this site where you use this address has been compromised?
Correct.
Okay. And then you go and you change it.
And there's a list probably 15, 20 sites long for one of my email addresses. And, I've changed the password on all of those.
Right. Okay. It sounds like work, August.
It is work, but, it's good work.
Do you think we lift people up? Do you think we make people happy? Do you think we make people feel better?
Well, not you. You're like Marvin the Paranoid Android.
Well, that's what this show has done to me. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. There you'll find notes for this show, for the last show we did, for all the shows we've done. Oh, and you can actually listen to the shows right there as well. The place for all of it is securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you would like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. The address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.